Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the In Session Film Podcast and this podcast review for June 8th, 2025. I'm Megan Kearns.
I am Max Vincent.
And we're here filling in for JD and Brendan. They couldn't make it due to scheduling conflicts, so Max and I are filling in. And we're going to be talking about Ballerina, or more accurately, its full title, From the World of John Wick, Ballerina. So this, of course, is a spinoff of the John Wick franchise. It starts taking place, well, not really starts, it starts much earlier. But anyway, it starts during the third John Wick Parabellum and continues in between the third and the fourth John Wick films. It stars Ana de Armas and a whole host of supporting actors like Angelica Houston, Gabriel Byrne, Lance Reddick, Ian McShane, Norman Reedus, and of course, Keanu Reeves himself. And this is written by Shay Hatton. It's directed by Len Wiseman of Underworld fame, question mark. I actually do enjoy those ridiculous movies. And let me give you the synopsis from the studio press release, and then we'll just dive right in. So taking place during the events of John Wick 3, the film follows Eve Maccaro, who is beginning her training in the assassin traditions of the Ruska Roma. So Max, let's just jump right in. What did you think of Ballerina?
Well, when they announced the project that Ana de Armas was going to star in a John Wick spinoff, centered around a very minor character from the third John Wick movie, I got pretty excited because I really like to see Ana de Armas in No Time to Die, the James Bond movie. She wasn't in it that much, but she definitely stole the show in that movie, even eclipsing Daniel Craig in that scene. So I was like, oh, this sounds like a really great action vehicle for Ana de Armas in the John Wick universe. You know, I love all the John Wick movies. I think John Wick Chapter 4 is one of the greatest action movies ever made.
Oh, wow.
I just, that experience of seeing it in the theater was unbelievable. Truly, like, it's one of the best theater experiences I've ever had.
Nice.
And I've loved, you know, all the main John Wick movies. The TV spinoff that came out, The Continental, was not very good. But yeah, no one saw it, but I did. So
yeah, I did not see it, so I will take your word for it.
But then they announced who was going to direct the movie, and I went, because I don't like Len Wiseman at all.
No,
I don't think he's made a single good movie. I think Underworld is probably his best, but you know, that's like, it's kind of like in the so bad it's good type of category of movies. And then there were reports that the test screenings were negative, that Chad Stahelski basically sort of overhauled the entire movie. I don't know whether or not it's true, but you can definitely tell in the back half of the film, there's a big difference in how the action is shot and how it's choreographed compared to the opening section of the movie. And I guess this is Len Wiseman's best movie, but I have no idea how much of it is actually his. So I did like it. I didn't love it. I think the first hour of it is a little rough around the edges, especially that first gunfight. I thought was terrible. And then it got a little better. And the last hour or so, when they're in this village, I guess this remote village, I thought was incredible. The action was absolutely phenomenal. I thought Ana de Armas kicked tons of ass. Keanu Reeves, you know, he was in he had a lot more screen time than I thought he was going to have in this film.
Right.
They utilize him very well as John Wick. You know, it's not his movie, but you know, he does have a significant role in it. I do have some issues with it. Notably, its villain, it's a terrible villain played by Gabriel Byrne. And yeah, it was an enjoyable time at the movies. Not the best, not the worst. It could have been worse, but I guess we have to thank I don't know, Chad Stahelski for saving this movie.
So I'm actually really glad that you brought up the reshoots, because there's been so much chatter and discourse about those reshoots. And Len Wiseman very recently spoke out. He spoke to the Hollywood Reporter about it. He spoke to Slash Film about it. And debunked that and said they were not reshoots. There was additional material that they shot afterwards because they ran out of time and budget, and the studio liked what they had filmed so much that they were like, no, give us more, give us more, give us more action. And supposedly the reason Chad Stahelski stepped in and filmed those was because Len Wiseman was sick in the hospital. So take that for what it's worth. But I completely agree with you that the end sequences are much more interesting. But interestingly, I find that Len Wiseman said one of the scenes that was added later was the opening sequence where we see Eve as a child and we see her father murdered, which is what kicks off her whole journey and her being recruited into the Ruskaroma and then wanting to seek vengeance on Gabriel Byrne's character. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but I completely agree with you that the back half of the film is much more effective than the beginning. So who knows whether it's true or not. Oh. But the official reports are that they were not reshoots. Don't get worried.
Well, if you go on the Wikipedia page for the movie, it says, directed by Len Wiseman, and there's a little footnote on it, and it says,
yes.
Chad Stahelski is uncredited as the director of reshoots, having overseen major additions to the movie without Wiseman's involvement. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether or not what is true, what is not true, but there is a big difference between stuff that I think was directed by Len Wiseman and what was added in by Chad Stahelski, especially in how it's shot too. The action is just that flamethrower scene is just amazing. Yeah, seen in a theater, that confrontation where she has that fire hose and it's fire and water is just so cool.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose thematically, but I mean, from an action stance, you can't argue it. It looks great. Mean,
a lot of John Wick movies are on the nose. The action is very physical, and there's a lot of physical comedy in those moments. Like in one of the scenes, she beats one of the bad guys with a TV remote, and it switches channels to the Three Stooges and Buster Keaton. So, like these gags like this, I think, are what makes this franchise so memorable.
Or the being impaled by an ice skate to the head, which is great. Very slasher film-esque, which is amazing. How do you, speaking of John Wick and obviously Keanu's cameo and obviously being a part of the John Wick franchise, how do you think it fares in the John Wick universe?
Well, as far as spin-offs go, it's definitely better than the Continental from the world of John Wick, which it's original. Like Ian McShane, who was in this film, talked about how bad it was. Chad Stahelski also talked about how bad the show was, how like none of the creators and the directors who worked on it actually consulted the people who created the franchise.
Right.
I have no idea why they gave Winston in that show an American accent when the character in all the other movies has a British accent because he's played by Ian McShane, and he never explained exactly how his accent changed, I guess, from the 1970s to 2014 when the first John Wick movie came out. I will say that some of the more, well, I mean, there is an emotional significance to seeing Lance Reddick on screen, because it's the last time that he it's his final film role, is what I meant. Because this movie's been in production for a very long time. They shot, they started shooting I think in 2022, and then they did additional photography in 2024. So it was he's not in the movie for a long time, but when I saw him, I just I felt very emotional just seeing his character, because I knew this was going to be the last time I was going to see this character on screen. Especially in the last John Wick movie, they killed him off. They didn't know at the time that he was going to be no longer with us when John Wick 4 came out, which came out a week after his passing. And so every single scene that they make and tribute to the character of the movie has a different significance when you watch it in the context of Lance Reddick's death. And I remember just being like so emotional watching. I think they were in the sewer in the fourth movie, and they were talking about how Sharon was more than just a friend. I forget. I've only seen this movie once, but it was such a moving scene. So seeing him in the movie was really emotional. And I did like the additions of Ian McShane as I guess Eve's mentor of sorts, who takes her to the Ruska Roma, and she has this relationship with him, and obviously the addition of John Wick at the end I thought was pretty cool, and Keanu is always excellent as I think one of his most iconic characters.
Oh, he's so great. He's always great. I love him so much, and I'm so glad that I feel like he hasn't been credited with being a great actor for a very long time, and I'm glad that not only is he an iconic action star now, but people are seeing, how charismatic he is, how magnetic he is, but also how expressive he is and how he really uses his physicality. So it's really nice to see. So I agree with you. I was really glad to see him here. And I too was surprised. Like I thought it was just going to be kind of like, two ships passing in the night and just kind of a nod to John Wick. But then I saw a scene, like I saw still from the scene of their confrontation. So I was like, oh, well, we're going to get more, but it was still great to see more of him. And actually Lance Reddick and Keanu Reeves, those are actually my favorite scenes because I love Lance Reddick. Loved him ever since The Wire as Lieutenant Daniels. He's great. He's great in every single project he's in, and he's absolutely great as Charon here. So good. Sad to see him no longer be with us, of course. Yeah, I have to say though, aside from those parts, and there are great action scenes, like you mentioned. I also really loved the grenade action scene. I think that one's incredible, where she uses the door to like protect herself. I love the car crash where she's leaving her first contract kill and she's coming out of the nightclub. And the camera is, zooming up. And so it looks like it's going to be a transition shot to something completely different. And she's getting away. And then she gets sideswiped and pushed back. And it's so good. And it's so surprising and such a great subversion of kind of what we're used to as an audience. And I loved that. And I love the ice skate. And I also really loved the kitchen fight scene using the pots and pans. And it's great because she's telling this chef, she's like, I don't want to hurt you. And then the chef's like, screw that. And, coming at her full force. So yeah, that was really great. So I do love the action scenes in this. But unfortunately for me, I'm the outlier here. This has a high rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a 76%. It's got a 3.5 on Letterboxd. And for me, I found this extremely heavy-handed in its imagery and its theming, and very repetitive, like with the Ballerina music box and the Tchaikovsky score over and over, and the religious tattoos and light versus dark. And for me, it was very heavy-handed. And I ended up, as much as I enjoyed the action, I ended up finding it very repetitive after a while. And I was kind of zoning out because I didn't really care about Eve as a character. I didn't care what really happened, but I was delighted to see Ian McShane again. I was delighted to see Lance Reddick and to see Keanu Reeves. So it was a very uneven experience for me because there were some great moments and great cinematography in certain scenes, but then in other parts, not so much. And I agree with you. I wasn't thrilled with Gabriel Byrne as a villain. And I like Gabriel Byrne. He's a great actor. I don't know what he's doing here.
He's the leader of a cult of what? Who?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. They have a mark on their arms, which is an X, and that's it. Like that's the only development we get.
Right. We are never told what this is a cult of, other than it's a town of assassins.
He has an entire town of people.
Yes.
It's like, who are these people? What are they doing?
Right. And that could have been really cool. And because that town is beautiful. That town in Austria is gorgeous.
They're all assassins too, right?
They're all assassins. Yes. That is ripe for a compelling story, or even just a tease of a story, something more, but we're never given anything. Just, it's a cult. It's a cult. We're told over and over. And it's just like, okay, we get it. It's a cult. You can't leave. It's a cult. Okay. But what are you a cult of? Like, are they worshiping assassins? Are they worshiping death?
I don't know. We'll never know.
No, unless I guess maybe the next movie will focus on that. Who knows? Very, but yeah. So speaking of the action, since we're talking about that too, how do you think the action sequences and the fights, how do you think they reveal the character development and like the personalities of Eve as well as the other characters, both for better or for worse?
I think what's interesting is if you contrast John Wick's fighting skills with Eve's fighting skills, are very different.
Yes.
John Wick is a little bit, especially in the last movie, he was a little bit sloppy at times. Like he would sometimes, like shield himself from bullets with his, I guess, bulletproof suit, which I always find very funny. It's like, how in the hell does this work? Like,
right?
Everyone's firing machine guns, and he's just, I guess, putting a sleeve over his face, and that somehow protects him from all bullets. But especially in the last like section of John Wick 4 in Paris, where he goes in the Arc de Triomphe, and then in the staircase, the Dragon's Breath, like the succession of fight sequences. At some point, he gets really tired, but he still pushes through, and it's really interesting to see that happen. And that, I don't know how long that was, but it was quite long, maybe 45 minutes or something. I have no idea. In this one, though, I would say that Eve's fighting style is a lot more precise, a little less sloppy, I guess, than John Wick. Because John Wick thrives when he has, I guess, lots of guns, and we can we noticed that in one of the. I think the funniest scene of the movie is where two assassins know that John Wick is like at the top of the stairs, and they tell each other, "This is suicide. It's fucking John Wick." And then the other one goes, "Well, come on, he's just one man," and they get immediately killed by John Wick.
Right. Famous last words.
It's like they know they're screwed, but whatever, we'll keep going. And there you go. But in the you mentioned the kitchen fight scene. I thought the kitchen fight scene was amazing because we get to see, really, I think, more than the other fight scenes, how intricate her combat style is, especially in using, I guess, the environment at her disposal.
Yes.
Sort of defeat the horde of assassins coming her way, like locking, I think, one of them in a freezer for a considerable amount of time. So I think Ana de Armas is a great action star. Mm-hmm. I don't think this movie develops her character beyond the action scenes in an efficient way. I think,
agreed.
I don't know. I think she was that interesting of a character compared to John Wick, but it's not like one of the worst movies I've seen. I think she thrives a lot more in action than, in a dialogue scene with Lance Reddick or Angelica Houston's character, who are basically just there to deliver exposition. Mm-hmm. And she kind of has to listen. I think the conversation she has with John Wick at the beginning of the movie are a lot more interesting than anything else, really. Mm-hmm. And especially her connection with the antagonist. Like I said, he leads a cult of assassins. And he killed her father, which is justifiable for her having revenge, but we never necessarily get to see sort of butting heads with the protagonist and the antagonist. And also they reveal at some point, I don't even know who the character's name is, but she's her sister. And it's like, what?
Lena.
Yeah. Okay. I had no idea who she was. We see her at I think she was in Prague at the Continental. Yes. And then we see her again in the village, and she's like, "I'm your sister," and then she gets killed, and it's like, all right, I guess. Like stuff like that kind of bothered me, but when we get to the action, I kind of didn't care that much because the action was so entertaining and so fun that at some point, you're basically just going to see an action movie and not necessarily a movie that will have a lot of character development. Mm-hmm. There are some times in which it's great to have a little bit more texture and emotional attachment. But in the case of, the world of John Wick, all I want to see is cool fight scenes, and I don't care about anything else.
Yeah, that is very fair. And I think the majority of audiences would agree with you on that. I did like, and you mentioned this, talking about Eve's creativity and resourcefulness and using the items around her. And I do really appreciate that, and how, even though both Eve and John Wick are both motivated by vengeance, so they seem to mirror each other, and their journeys kind of parallel. There are different. I was reading the production notes, and Len Wiseman said, they're different because she's trying to get into this world of being an assassin, and he's trying to get out. And I'm like, yep, okay, that's very true. But I think that the characters are much more effective, like you said, when we're looking at them from an action stance, and how they each fight differently, and how John Wick is exceptional. In addition to guns, he's exceptional at martial arts. And whereas she does not overpower people because of her stature, she is very innovative and creative, which I think is really compelling in theory to watch. I say compelling in theory because for me, not all of it was compelling, but a lot of it was. But I also couldn't help but compare Ana de Armas's performance to Keanu Reeves, or to someone else who is very physical and very expressive in an action role such as Charlize Theron in Atomic Blonde, which to me I found a much more compelling performance just from a strict acting via facial expressions and via body language. But I think if we're talking about just doing the action scenes, I think Ana de Armas is great, especially considering she does so many of her own stunts. And that's one of the hallmarks of the John Wick movies, is that while, there are, of course, stunt doubles, most of the time the actors are doing their own stunts. And that's so great to see, so you can stay with that character and feel more immersed, which I think is important. Something else that I think is interesting is that thinking about the characters of even John Wick in the films, it's kind of interesting thinking about revenge, because there are so many revenge movies out there and so many different and similar revenge stories, and how I think these two are in conversation with each other also, because it really shows how Sisyphean the cycle of violence is, and that, you think you get out and nope, you're back in, or you think you kill this person and nope, someone else is then coming for you. And it just, violence begets violence, and it keeps going nonstop. And so there's an impactful message there too, if you're looking for it. But yeah, I think that's kind of interesting, seeing the different perspectives of these films, if we're looking a little bit deeper than just the action scenes, which are great.
I mean, in the first John Wick movie, they set the John Wick character quite well. They say he's not the boogeyman; he's the person you send to kill the fucking boogeyman.
Yes.
You notice, like, okay, this guy means business. But in this movie, we never really get to see exactly why Eve, will stand out amongst the pack of the other ballerinas that are trained. We get to see this training montage, I think, earlier in the movie, and it's like, okay, I get, she's pretty cool, I guess, in action, and she can hold her own, but how is she different from the other ones, or how is she different from John Wick 2? We never really get that.
I completely agree with you. And before I had ever seen John Wick, years and years and years ago, I have to say, in addition to Keanu Reeves, the hook is, of course, well, he's going on a murder spree revenge quest for his puppy. And it's like, immediately, like, you're in, and then you're there for all of the cool, badass moments of Keanu Reeves. So yeah, so we don't have the same hook, and you're right. How is she going to stand apart? And who knows, maybe that'll be fleshed out more, but I would have liked her character fleshed out a little bit more. But again, really cool action scenes. And speaking of those action scenes, as well as the production design, how do you think that because these films are so big on world building and expanding the world, and this one expands the world of the Ruska Roma, how do you think the production design creates tension and expands the world?
I think, interestingly, I always like to see how the world gets expanded in each John Wick movie, because it's, at first I think it was just the first movie was just in New York. If I can't, I've not seen it in a long time.
No, I think you're right. I think it is.
But yeah, they introduced the concept of the Continental in New York, and then we move away from that in the second movie, third movie, fourth movie. So we really get to see how it's a global chain of hotels with assassins around the world. And I thought that was very cool, because we get to see different fighting styles as well. Like in the last movie, John Wick 4, we got Donnie Yen's character, who's a martial artist. Yes. More than a skilled, I guess, hitman who can hold his own with guns. And Donnie Yen is a great, great actor who starred in a lot of really amazing martial arts movies. So it was great to see him there. In this one, we get a little bit more expansion with Norman Reedus's character, who's trying to get out of the cult in the Prague Continental. That hotel looks fantastic, but that's pretty much it, I guess. And also the town at the end, also the cult town. I don't know where exactly that is, but it was Austria. In Austria. Yeah, it was. That I love that they use the environment a lot in these movies, where we get to really explore the town through these action scenes, because she moves around from one place to the next, and there's a different weapon there, or, flamethrowers at some point. That whole sequence was amazing. So definitely, but I will also say that the cinematography for me is a lot more important than the production design, in terms of visualizing these action sequences and the world of John Wick. Like the second, third, and fourth movie have a very distinct visual signature. Yes. I don't know how to pronounce the cinematographer's name. I think it's Dan Laustsen. He is amazing. He's worked with Guillermo del Toro as well. He just shot Frankenstein, which is coming out this year. He just, I mean, the visual inspirations for John Wick. I read a quote from Stahelski yesterday. He talked about anime, Bertolucci. I forget the other ones, but you can definitely tell, that they're it's very distinct and visually just jaw-dropping when you see the inventiveness that comes with crafting each action sequence more memorable than the last. I have to find that quote though.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a good quote. The visuals have always been incredible. How do you think speaking of the cinematography and the visuals, how do you think they fare here in Ballerina?
Well, it's not as strong as John Wick 4.
No.
But I mean, again, I think John Wick 4 is one of the greatest action movies ever made. So I got the quote right here. He has visual references in his head from Wong Kar-wai, anime, Sergio Leone, Bernardo Bertolucci, and Andrei Tarkovsky throughout the John Wick franchise.
Yep.
And I will say, like, the stuff that's directed by Chad Stahelski, I think I can tell because they look gorgeous. The colors, especially, are very expressive compared to the stuff that Len Wiseman directed, which is a little bit more flat, a little bit more murky, and the colors are a little bit washed out. But when I think Stahelski has a very clear vision of how he wants his movies to look like, and they look a little bit more heightened. Instead of being very gritty. I think that's why the Continental wasn't so good, because it just didn't look or feel like it belonged in the world of John Wick. Whereas in Ballerina definitely feels like it is cut from the same cloth.
Yes.
Even though you can tell there are some distinct visions between Wiseman and Stahelski. But I think the film looks gorgeous for an action movie. I don't think a lot of blockbusters these days don't look very good.
No.
I know a lot of people are excited for the new Wicked movie. I just did not like the first one. And
I did.
I don't like how it looks too. I think it looks terrible. But whatever. I mean, I'm always very astonished when we get an action movie that that knows that film is a visual medium and can excite people just by crafting action that is purely visual that you can enjoy on a massive screen, because that's what the movies are made for me at least. Seeing creative stuff being employed by the camera or just by the stunt work. There's this crazy scene where the guy's leg catches fire and he starts kicking.
Yes, trying to set her on fire.
Yeah, that is like, it's so creative, and it's stuff like this that makes me happy when I go see a movie, rather than shaky cam, quick cut action that like in Taken 3 where Liam Neeson jumps the fence and there's like 50 cuts for him to jump that fence. But I was quite blown away by how good the movie looked, and but I don't think it looks as strong as John Wick 4, but it's still, because John Wick 4 they go away. Chad Stahelski gets away with stealing a lot of strong visual hallmarks. Like at the beginning, there's a Lawrence of Arabia reference, and there's a Warriors reference. Like it's like they're shameless like references, but it's cool.
Listen, if you can do it well,
and in this movie, there's a lot of that as well, but it may not be as, I guess, I don't know how to say it, but like as elaborate as in the fourth John Wick movie.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it's quite as vivid. The inspirations that you were talking about in that quote that Stahelski was talking about, I mean, it's not a surprise at all, especially Wong Kar-wai, who has the most vivid, lush color palette and visuals that are so sensual and just envelop you in that story, whatever story that he's telling. And anime, of course, makes sense. There's always so much usage of, the blues and the purples and the pinks, very much the bisexual lighting, which always adds this kind of heightened fantastical realm to film, which I just absolutely adore. And we get some of that here, especially in the nightclub sequence, which is great. And there is a fluidity to the cinematography and to the shots and the edits in the John Wick films, as well as what we get here, that I think really is propulsive And you're right. I cannot stand a shaky cam in an action sequence. I cannot stand when it's so close you cannot see what's happening, or the cuts are so fast. And occasionally it can work, but most of the time it just doesn't. And it either is hiding bad production or it is completely undercutting excellent stunt work and choreography. And so it's extremely frustrating. And so that it's great to see that that's not being done here. And it is so exciting to see filmmakers who care so much about the visuals. And, you were talking about the effects, and there's so many there's so many practical effects here, which is great too, because so often things are, fix it in post, do it in post, CGI. And of course, I'm sure there's CGI used here as well, but there are so many practical effects, like the flamethrower sequence. A lot of it was done practically, which is out of control wild. Like, just thinking about how dangerous that scene is, and that so much of it was done practically, it's crazy. Same with the grenades, and apparently there were like all kinds of like trap doors around for the actors to like dash into, and I love that. It's great. So I agree with you on the visuals, that they're not as strong as the other John Wick films, but it definitely has that signature language visually of the other films, which is great.
And I think, quick cuts in action can work if you have a really great editor who knows what they're doing. Because yesterday I watched a movie called The Old Guard by Gina Prince Bythewood.
Oh, I love The Old Guard. And yeah, it's a great film.
It's an incredible movie. There's a lot of quick cuts in that movie, in the action, but you can see what's going on. You can feel the rhythm also that the editor and Gina want to establish. And, sometimes it can be a little rough around the edges, but when it works really well. And I think, in this, John Wick isn't necessarily, in that sort of action philosophy. They want us to basically just see everything. Sometimes we have these long takes also. In the fourth John Wick movie, The Dragon's Breath, overhead Hotline Miami reference, I guess, that was so cool to watch. In this movie, we don't have that. But, when the action kicks into gear, for me, it's a pleasure to see well mounted, superbly choreographed, and often very funny. This movie's very funny. When we get, when you get that Buster Keaton reference, or when we get Ana de Armas locking that cook up in the freezer, I thought that, like details like this are what makes this franchise for me stand out amongst the, bevy of Hollywood action blockbuster franchises. Even, Mission Impossible, which had its last movie come out 2 weeks ago, that is another one where the details, sometimes can make for some really, really, really funny physical comedy. Like, I love that plane scene at the end of the Final Reckoning. Just the expressions on both the actors' faces as Tom Cruise dangles on the plane was extremely funny. So it's stuff like this that makes these films, these action films, stand out and give them their unique signature, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking about little touches like that, also, again, speaking about Stahelski's inspirations, not a surprise at all that he's inspired by Tarkovsky, because just as it is in Atomic Blonde, and just as it is here, one of the movie marquees in the background is showing a Tarkovsky like film marathon, and I'm like, of course, because it's very clear. So yeah, seeing those little touches is really great. Something else I was reading about in that cult assassin town is apparently the outfits they're wearing are not the typical ski resort wear. They're not as bulky. They're much more tailored to kind of give you a clue that they're assassins. And when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a really nice touch. That is also that you might pick up on the first time, or maybe on a rewatch. And I like those little touches. They're great. So very important, really great in the environmental storytelling, which is nice to see. So how do you think, thinking about this more about the revenge element, how do you think this fares? Like, do you think it succumbs to too many revenge tropes? Because you had mentioned earlier about, you weren't sure how Ana de Armas's Eve really sets herself apart. Do you think this sets itself apart in a revenge story at all? Or does it even matter because the action is so good?
Not really.
Okay.
I don't think it stands apart from a lot of revenge movies in general. But this is an action movie. A lot of people don't care about the plot, and I'm one of those people. I mean, if it was really, really, really bad, if the action was bad too, that would be a problem. Because most people that want to see an action movie, they don't want to sit through I guess, an hour of exposition and lore dumping, as in, the last Mission Impossible movie, which a lot of people didn't like. That first hour or so, which is very, very dense, very heavy. I liked it. Whatever.
I liked it.
Yeah. But a lot of people just want to see big action sequences on a massive scale. And, the excuse is, well, we're going to have, her father get killed, and then, it'll be this revenge story, this very classic story. And that's pretty much it. I don't think it stands itself apart. And I don't think it really matters that much from a film perspective. And, the John Wick franchise started with, revenge on a dead dog. So there you go.
Yeah, but that's different. That I think that's not something that's seen. Typically women are fridged where someone is coming to get revenge for their, their dead wife, their dead girlfriend. And so that's a twist on it that does make it different. I am one of the outliers in action who I do want to see good plot development. I do want to see good, like well-written dialogue. So I am the outlier, but I hear you. Most people, that is not what they're here for. They're here just for, the good killing. The good punching, the good stabbing, all of that fun stuff. Which, hey, I like that too. I like both. And yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think this really sets itself apart either. Like thinking about, even when we're talking about women and assassins, because such a big part of this film is the fact that, fight like a girl, which, oh God, that quote makes me absolutely cringe. And it's unfortunate because I really like Sharon Duncan Brewster. I think she's a great actor, but that line of dialogue just, I cannot stand it. And also, the Evanescence song, the Amy Lee and Halsey song is like fight like a girl. And I don't think it really sets itself apart in other women assassin films either. But again, it's a fun ride. It's a fun ride. So, maybe it matters to me, but it probably doesn't to most people. What would you like to see in a sequel? Because producer Erica Lee has talked about that they want to do a sequel. Len Weissman has talked about the desire for a sequel. If there is a sequel, what would you like to see?
Not Len Weissman come back.
That is fair.
Have I guess like a more talented director make the movie so that Chad Stahelski doesn't have to come in for whatever reason to do some expensive reshoots. Again, there are some conflicting reports on that. So some will say one thing, the others will say another thing. But I will say, I think it is right for a sequel. I think Ana de Armas' character could show up again in another John Wick movie, whether it's Ballerina 2 or John Wick 5, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chad Stahelski is interested in making John Wick 5. I don't know how they're going to do it because, spoiler alert, he's dead. So I think I know how they're going to do it, but also if they're doing what I think they're going to do, I think it's going to be an amazing movie. But anyways, I think Ana de Armas' character is definitely set up to be in a lot more movies in the John Wick universe, whether again it's Ballerina 2 or another John Wick movie. I also think I do think it's a little complicated for this franchise to kind of stay relevant and continue on without Keanu Reeves, because it was his vehicle first and foremost. And the Continental didn't work. Tried to expand the lore of the John Wick franchise, but it did it very badly, and it didn't have Keanu Reeves, it didn't have Chad Stahelski, and this movie wasn't going to have Chad Stahelski, but he had to come back because he was going to make his Highlander movie. Now I think he's entering production on that one this year or next year. It's been in development for a long time. So I don't know what they're going to necessarily do with like other characters of the franchise. I mean, Donnie Yen is going to direct a film on Kane.
Yep.
Set up in a post-credit scene in the last John Wick movie. I'm curious to see it. I think Donnie Yen is a great actor and a great martial artist. Yeah. I don't think he's a very good director, but we'll see. We'll see.
Fingers crossed. Hopefully it's good. Yeah. I don't know what I would like to see. I think I would like to see, I think I'm actually good with the world as is. I personally don't need any more. But I do think that without Keanu Reeves, I personally am not as invested. So I think I would like to see other types of films. But if this is going to continue expanding, which it is going to, because this is a juggernaut of a franchise. Yeah, I am intrigued by the Donnie Yen one, just because Donnie Yen is such an iconic action star and he is so great. And I hope he's I hope he's a better director, you know.
Yeah, they are working on an animated prequel film as well that was announced at CinemaCon.
Mm-hmm.
And Reeves is confirmed to reprise his role through, I guess, voice acting performance.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be directed by Shannon Tyndall with a screenplay written by Vanessa Taylor.
Vanessa Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're also developing a TV series called John Wick Under the High Table, which was greenlit in August of 2024. But I guess we'll see when that gets if it if the cameras start rolling. But I think I have a lot more faith in this one because Stahelski is actually overseeing that one compared to the Continental. But I don't know. I guess we'll see when we get there if these movies are going to keep this franchise alive by bringing us new things. I think Ballerina was a good movie. It was an enjoyable movie, but it didn't really do anything new. And what I liked about the John Wick movies is that each installment brought something new to the table. It refined what Stahelski had established in the last movie. It's like, how can we make it bigger, better, more exciting, more fun? How can we redefine action physicality? How we can how can we shoot an action sequence? How can we exploit Keanu Reeves's talents from one film to the next? How can we build upon what we had built with this character from the first movie and the second movie? So I guess we'll see. I'm curious about the Kane film because I think if they have a bigger emphasis on martial arts than Gun Fu, I think that could make for a really exciting movie. Same thing with the animated film they're doing.
Right,
so,
right.
We'll see, but we'll get there when we get there.
No, I'm interested about the animated one as well, especially because thinking of another Keanu Reeves project, thinking of the Matrix franchise, I absolutely love the Animatrix. I think that it was a really creative and innovative way to tell more stories in that universe. So, and you can obviously do things visually that you just cannot do, in live action. So I'm excited to see that too. And I love that he loves this character and this world so much that he's always so excited to come back into it. And just his effusive praise for the filmmakers and the cast and crew and for just film in general. He loves film, and it's so delightful to see him talk about film and be a part of projects that he loves. So that's really exciting. So yeah. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm sure I will check them out because I watched them all, so except for the Continental, which apparently I can skip.
It's not good. And the fact that he can also do this at 60, which is
yes. Yes. Maybe that's my issue with this. And I know, we're starting this at the beginning of Eve's career, but maybe that's the thing, because part of it is I find older characters and older actors much more interesting because of the life experience or the ruggedness, the jadedness maybe they bring to the table. So who knows, maybe I'd like to see an Eve in 20 years, who knows. Or maybe Keanu Reeves later, although the character's deceased in this, but oh well, we'll get other stories to be told in this. Any final thoughts, Max, that you want to share on this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid time. I enjoyed seeing it in a theater. A great, popcorn action movie. Gets the job done. Ana de Armas kicks ass. I think she can be a great, action star with the right material. Like in No Time to Die, I think she's going to do a movie with Tom Cruise next. I have no idea if that's happening because I have no idea what Tom Cruise is also doing next as well. Many of his movies are at various stages of development, but it is a better vehicle for her as an action star, Ballerina, than Ghosted and The Gray Man. So, yeah.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, and this didn't work as nearly as well for me, but the action is just superb. I did not find this as compelling as the other John Wick films, but when this works, it really, really works. The action is superb. So I definitely agree with you on that. And so if you agree or disagree, be sure to leave us a comment and reach out to us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. You can email us at insessionfilm@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And stay tuned. Brendan and JD will be back for In Session's next podcast review of Wes Anderson's dark comedy, The Phoenician Scheme. So be sure to check that out. I'm Megan Kearns.
And I am Max Vincent.
Thank you so much for listening to the In Session Film Podcast. We'll see you next time.